I think it's a go. Hi everyone, warm welcome to this year's event of World Art Day. It's the 15th of April 2021. We didn't think that we will be this digital even this year, since last year we met at World Art Day in a studio as well with participants from all over the world. We would have thought that we had another situation, but we haven't. So I hope you are safe and staying calm, and warm welcome to us here today. My name is Zandra Thuvesson. I work as a cultural policy strategist at Konstnärernas Riksorganisation in Sweden, which is an umbrella organization for the artists in Sweden. We organize about 3,400 artists. Today we are about to have two seminars, each 45 minutes. The first seminar will touch upon the Nordiska Modellen, the infrastructure of the cultural funding situation we have had historically in the Nordic region for many decades. It's under a bit of threat now, so that's why it's as well important to raise awareness of this situation. With me in that seminar, I have two guests. One from Finland, Annukka Vahasoyrinki, and one guest from Norway, actually a Swedish woman called Moa Björnson. And later on, after 45 minutes or so, we will meet three artists who will talk to me about how it has been to work as an artist during this Corona COVID situation. I have an artist from Turkey, Asli Öztoyran. I have an artist from England, Jeremy Deller, and as well I have Sara Edström, the head of the organization, Konstnärernas Riksorganisation in Sweden, an artist herself as well. So let's start. I think hope everyone has, well, if you're watching this, you have been able to log on to this talk. And please stay with us. I will introduce Annukka and Moa very briefly, and then they will give us a more background information about their situations and their platforms. So first of all, welcome Annukka Vahasoyrinki. I tried your last name just before we started this, and you gave me some good applause for that. Thank you.
Perfectly.
Very welcome. Couldn't you please tell us about who are you? You worked in Brussels and you worked in different, you worked in galleries. You have a degree in both art and literature.
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation. It's lovely to be here today, and greetings from Helsinki. I work currently at the Artists Association of Finland, which is exactly like Konstnärernas Riksorganisation. We are an umbrella organization for visual arts in Finland, and we represent about 3,000 visual artists, professional visual artists. I have been working previously with art exchange and promoting arts and culture also internationally, like Zandra, you mentioned in Brussels, developing the connections between the Benelux countries and Finland, but also later on in the Nordic context, which is very close to my heart. I worked as an advisor at the Nordic Culture Point, which is a cultural organization based here in Helsinki, and it operates under the Nordic Council of Ministers and is especially concentrated on advancing the exchange and collaboration of cultural actors within the Nordics.
I'm so happy to have you here with your experience and background in these infrastructures. I will get back to you in a minute or so, but first of all, I would like to invite Moa Björnson as well and say welcome to you. Hi, Moa.
Hi, and hi from Norway. Good to be here in this Nordic seminar and speaking English with broken Swedish. Yeah, I'm located on the island that you can see from on my backdrop. It's called Traena. It's one of the smallest municipalities and one of the most remote ones in Norway. So I'm living right on the Arctic Circle. So it's quite high up, but still Norway is wide. So it's a long way to go further up north. I'm head of development in the municipality here. Been living in Norway in 6 years now, and before that I worked with more urban than rural processes, with urban innovation processes in the city of Malmö, and I've been also a consultant working from my own firm with both smaller cities like, for example, Åmål, where I come from. I'm sure that you have all heard about the fantastic movie Fucking Åmål. And I'm also in some different boards, both art associations and other ones.
So happy to have you here as well, Moa. I think that the two of you are showing us the interesting bridge with art and innovation and cooperation in our region. So looking forward to listening to you more, Moa. Thank you. Annukka, I've asked you to start with your presentation.
Yes.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. Let me try and share this for you. Does it look okay? Can you see everything?
We can see everything.
Let me see.
It's not full screen.
Yes. I'm sorry. My technology is not brilliant.
We can have it like this, Annukka. It works.
Okay.
Well.
Oh, here we are. Yeah. Okay. So I'm talking today a little bit about the funding and support structures of arts and culture here in the Nordics, because they have in fact been developing quite hand in hand over the well, actually centuries, but especially over the past 50 or so decades. Briefly, I already introduced a little bit who I am and where I come from. Artists Association of Finland, our history is also very much intertwined with the development of the arts and culture structures here in the Nordics. We were founded already in the late 19th century, and similarly to our sister organizations from other Nordic countries. Today, we are very much working as a lobby organization, concentrating on making a change in cultural policy here in Finland, especially aiming to increase the appreciation of visual art to begin with, but especially to enhance the working conditions of visual artists. There are still quite a lot of problems with that sector. It is hard to get your livelihood as a visual artist in this country. I titled this presentation as Art as a Public Service, because I think this really sort of summarizes the Nordic values and the Nordic concept of art funding and art structures. This is how we, in my opinion, how we jointly view art and where we see the value of art. The funding structures are very much, they have been developed hand in hand with the welfare state, with the Nordic welfare states. And art as a public service means here that we see it as something that is comparable to, say, education or healthcare. It is something that should be available for everybody, and that is like a basic right for our citizens. The practice of granting direct support to artists dates back actually really far already. In Sweden and Denmark, it was the Crown who would provide grants in the beginning, and later on also in Finland and Norway, the Senate. So the historical cycle has been very similar over the whole of the Nordics. The system that we are familiar with today was established very much in the 1960s. This is where the sort of administrative bodies were first founded, and also these guiding principles that are really crucial still today, like for example, peer review. When distributing grants, we very much rely on art experts and the peer review. And also another important value is the arm's length policy. So these administrative bodies operate with an arm's length from the ministry and from the actual cultural politics. And here, if we look at the strategies, for example, of both on the Nordic level, but also on a national level, I believe these questions of equal participation and accessibility are very much important still today. And I think Moa will talk more about these issues as well. For example, in Finland, the role of municipalities is very crucial in funding arts and culture. And also the sort of cultural politics that is being done locally very much steers what kind of direction we are going towards in our arts and culture developments. And then there's the Nordic level, which is interesting and joint for all of us. The Nordic Council of Ministers was established in the 70s as well. And cultural collaboration was from the very beginning one of the very central aspects of the Nordic collaboration. And I'm sure we'll get back to this a little bit later on, but there are some alarming news looming about the Nordic funding for culture in the future. And then later on in the 2000s, this is also something joint for our region. This was era when art and culture was seen or was beginning to be seen more as an industry. So there were new kind of funding structures, for example, for art export or promoting cultural entrepreneurship, for example. And in some art fields, this development has of course gone very well, like for example in the music or in the film industry. But then again, visual arts, where I come from, it is much more complicated to build industry around these products of visual arts because you can't exactly mass produce them. Just a couple of curiosities of the Finnish system. I don't think that these are very unfamiliar to the other Nordics either, but I know that they are like a quite special aspects of art funding in general. So first of all, the role of private foundations is very strong in Finland, and especially in the recent, say, 20 years, the volume of the funding has been growing even more rapidly on the private sector, on the foundation sector, than on the public funding. And this is of course an interesting thing all in all, because the foundations are independent organizations, so they can set whatever kinds of guidelines for the distribution of money than they wish. So for example, different kinds of theme calls have been quite common in the recent years. Another curiosity is this using the gambling profits for financing art and culture. So we have had a state monopoly on gambling for 70 years, and from the very beginning, the profits have been used to fund art and culture, but also science and sports and social work. But the special thing is that, which is of course quite complicated as well, is that the gambling money is used to finance also like permanent structures of art and culture. And we are currently, this is one of the biggest issues we are facing right now in Finland. The gambling profits are going down because there is more attention being paid to the sort of harms and negative effects of gambling, and trying to control this will minimize gambling and hence also the profits. And the last thing about the Finland is I just want to give you a figure and a context. So our culture budget is 0.8% of the total budget, considering how much of a big influence art and culture has in a society as a whole. And I wish to think that we are sort of a civilized society who values their artists and their cultural institutions and the art education. This number is alarmingly low. So looking to the future, what's next? The funding system, the Nordic model, has served very well for a long time, but it also already shows some signs of aging, and especially questions of equality between different art forms and art sectors is a question here. I mentioned before that the whole budget is 0.8, but of that, it is only 1% that is directed for visual arts, for example, and there is some inequality there. Some other art forms have a stronger, for example, institutional structures and also hence stronger funding. On the Nordic level, what we are looking into is this Nordic Council of Ministers vision for 2030 about making the Nordics the most integrated and sustainable region in the world. This is a wonderful goal, and I believe that the arts and culture sector will wholeheartedly support this. But the alarming news is that in order to reach this goal, there is going to be cuts in the arts and culture budget. And this is something we are, of course, all very alarmed about, and the cuts are supposed to take place in the next 4 years, and probably also set the course for the culture funding from there on. This is something I believe is also common for all of us. It's the status of self-employed and freelance artists, which is quite complicated in all of our countries. Not only because employment, having employment as an artist is quite tricky to begin with. For example, in visual arts, we don't really have workplaces in the traditional sense, but also there are some aspects of the social security system that make the situation of freelancers quite vulnerable. And this has been enhanced, especially now in the COVID times when people have been lacking work. And of course, last but not least, recovering from COVID crisis, I'm sure we can all join in the thought that art and culture is the bridge that will help us get over and get back to reconstructing our society and our everyday lives, and find the meaning and value in our everyday lives. But at the same time, the question is, how can art and culture do that with the continuously diminishing funding? So this is a little bit of a kind of a negative, a little bit of a looming ending here, but I hope that Moa can give us some encouraging examples about cultural collaboration and cultural activities in the Nordics, and maybe we can go to these a little bit further in our later discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Annukka. So interesting to hear about these figures and infrastructures that for us who have been working in the area for a decade or so, know about this, and it's really alarming. Can I ask you just one question regarding the gambling going down, regarding the funding? Has the government in Finland answered upon that? Are they planning for giving more money to answer up to this?
Yes, so there has been this promise of temporary compensation. Okay. So only for this year, but from next year on, we are in a situation where everything is unclear and up in the air, and this is truly a very large political question, because, like I said, arts and culture is not the only industry that is affected here. Also, sports and science and so forth. Yeah. So it remains to be seen what happens.
So you have a combination of the COVID situation and this gambling money going down, and as well the Nordic Ministry of Council giving less money to the culture. So it's really an alarming situation.
Yes, indeed, it really is. And this is the time where we really need to make noise about arts and culture and the importance of it, and the fundamental sort of value of it in the society.
That's why I'm so happy that you're here with us today as well. I was in another seminar some months ago when I spoke indirectly to a person in England who's the head of the Arts Council, and we spoke about John Keynes and how this historic person, economy professor, I think Keynes was, he spoke upon how the state must invest during crisis time, and this was during the Second World War, and how we need to invest for the future regarding arts and culture, because that's so important to build up countries after crises.
Precisely. I believe that also, of course, this kind of time of crisis, shows that there's a possibility for segregation, and we know that arts and culture is something that brings people together and creates belonging and togetherness. So only for these reasons it would be really important to invest in arts and culture. Of course, it has various, as we all know, various other benefits as well. Arts and culture is an industry that creates revenue and so forth. We can talk about the financial aspects or the cultural or the societal. In all these ways, it is truly an investment worth making.
And we want to be a region in the world where arts can exist for only arts itself as well.
Exactly.
So thank you for some minutes, Annukka, and I will invite Moa to tell us about how are you working in the Traena municipality regarding, you have artists in residence and so on. I'm so looking forward to listening to you, Moa. Please, the floor is yours, I was supposed to say, but the screen is yours.
Thank you, Zandra, and thank you, Annukka. It was really interesting to get the overall perspective and hear from your point of view what is happening on the higher top levels. I will zoom in on some different local practices, I would say, with examples from my perspective and from the north of Norway, but also I will start a little bit with where I am from, because I think it's interesting. Or first I just need to ask, do you see my full screen?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect.
But we can also see the icons down there.
Yeah, but the icons, you can just see that I have a lot of icons. Yeah, now you don't see them, right?
No. Yeah.
Now I want to start with, because we all come from places. We are all local people. And we all have history, and I think that we are either we are professionals within economics, or a chaos pilot like me, or an artist. We have our different local communities and local stories that colors us. And as I said, that I'm from Åmål, raised in Åmål. I just want to share with which kind of perspectives that I started to look on art. I was 14 when the movie Fucking Åmål came, and I was completely in the target group for that. I wanted to leave Åmål. I just said, as they did in the movie, I'm moving from here and I will never come back, you know. And I think that all kids in the age of 14, 15 says that, even if they live in central Stockholm or wherever they are. It's part of growing up being pissed off about things. And I'm also sharing this picture of an old church. For me, this was, when growing up in Åmål, this was just a building that was actually quite roughy and old and took a lot of space in the central. I'd never been inside there for a long time, and I felt it was like kind of a shame that it was there in the central, and I knew that there was a lot of history about it, but I didn't really know what it had been and why it was still there. It showed out that it was the oldest building in Åmål. So when I educated as an KS pilot, and I was out living in London for a while, and I came back as quite young, 20, 23 years old or something, asking the head of culture in my municipality if, can't this place and this building be a development project? Can we do something that fills this place with some content? Because nowadays it's only walls. And he said from his desk, yes, we can. Let's do a project. And of course, this was filled with a lot of art and a lot of collaborative art. And I'm not going to go into details, but just saying that what a lovely way to say yes to things happening and use and say yes to different art fields to become and come inside and take part of one of the oldest cultural heritage places and buildings and try to develop it into something new. Now, when going back visiting Åmål, I can see that this place has a much nicer finish on the outside. You have taken care of the history, and you have actually built it up into a kind of a cultural venue and a cultural place for a lot of different types of culture. Actually, it was also a boxing game once inside. So my perspectives, first of all, is like art can be a fantastic tool to work with a lot of different societal change processes. And as I do in my profession, I'm not an artist myself, but I see the fine outputs that comes when you actually integrate art in all development processes. And this is a quote from Top of the World, from Artica Svalbard in Longyearbyen, where I'm mentioned that I'm member of the board for an art institution or foundation. And this is our lead question. Art is present wherever important questions are being asked. And I think that is so true today. And there are a lot of different interesting and important places and big questions. And we try to separate them into different angles. Those ministers are in control over those topics, and climate issues are about climate issues, and then art can be something that actually puts other questions also on the agenda. And I think that many policymakers have forgotten that, how a strong role art can have in actually creating our new future. So I'm concerned when they are trying to take away funding and money from these actually central change makers of the world. So I'm just borrowing this quotation. Also, when talking about art and being central and maybe policy making centrals and those who decides, I think location is a very interesting theme. When I moved to Traena, this island where I said that I live in, we have only 450 inhabitants, and we are the third smallest municipality in Norway. People said to me that I moved far away. Then living in Malmö, working with urban processes and so on, they said, why did you move so far away? And I said, far away from what? From you? From Brussels, where our concentration was? Or was it really far away? If you just see it from some other perspectives, I could just as much answer that I'm not far away. I'm central to the most important issues in the world, the climate issues, the resources and everything. So it's just about where you put the nail and where you locate yourself from. And then it's also about what is actually central nowadays. Maybe we need new definitions of it. And I think that Now we call things remote or working on from distance and so on, but what is it that we actually measure it from? Yeah, our bigger cities that are now during the pandemic in lockdown. Maybe then definition of being central is actually who has the highest speed broadband or Wi-Fi connection. Then you can be central from anywhere. And also, what is it to be central? Is it to be central to the big global questions? Is it to be central or near to have a quality of time or work time? Or is it to be central to be things near those things that triggers one other? And I think these are interesting questions for all of us. I'm not an super ruralist. I'm a both urbanist and ruralist, and I like the combination. And I think that art and artists and cultural actors can be part of changing the groundwork on what we actually, how we define things and what's really the norm. You probably all know about Rem Koolhaas. He has all of the sudden get the eyes opening on the countryside from being a super urbanist and one who sets the agenda on many things. He got the eyes open for saying, like, while we were so focused on the big metropolitan areas where all the cool things happened, all the innovation happened, all the good art, all the exciting design processes and architecture happens, things happen in the countryside. We were just not taking, being aware of it. And when he make an big expo in Guggenheim in New York, of course, this is again set on the agenda. And I think it's interesting that we give some people opportunities to set the agenda. But as Annukka said, maybe we should be more raising our voices and trying to set the agenda ourselves as well. Or you as artists, or whoever you are in the room. I would say that art, as you can hear, I'm engaged in art processes, and I think that art can be a real driver for both livable local communities and big cities. This is a picture from the island where I live, and it's taken in the 40s from a family who was on a Sunday tour, and we don't know what they talked about. If they talked about the future, how it would look like, how the world would look like after the war, for example, we can't say. But I'm quite sure that they didn't could foreseen that it would look like this in the same spots just some decades after. This is the festival of Traena each year in July when it's not pandemic. People are sitting tight and using music and art as a reason to come, a reason to be, a reason to belong. And I would really say that these processes opening up for art has been a definer of which place we are. So art can really change the landscape, I would say, and culture can. I will just briefly say that how can you work with this from a municipality perspectives then? Yes, in 2015, we had some empty houses, and then we just say that let's open up for more people to come and be part of this community. So we opened an artist in residency, which later also became a business and chefs. And nowadays it's families and bureaucrats and everything in residence all of a sudden. We just opened and let people apply to come here and be a test resident, a part-time local for a while. 1 to 3 months and test the island, and maybe they would like it, and maybe they would do fantastic things together with us in the local community. Now it's gone 5 years, and we see a lot of contributions and collaboration projects, everything from physical buildings to light design processes to food, new companies making making new innovation from the sea. Just going through this, we can see that it's everything from fine art to small processes to real business development processes. So I think that art should be present wherever important questions are being asked, and that we should really, really take this serious, because it defines us both now, and it will be part of changing our future, both in the bigger cities and in the tiniest small local communities around the Nordics. Thank you.
Thank you, Moa. You're raising 1,000 questions in my mind. I have to narrow down for a couple. When we spoke before, you told me about what's happening when artists come to live at the island of Traena. You say that they interact with society in such an exciting way. Couldn't you elaborate just briefly on that? What happens?
Yeah, it's of course a lot of different processes according to who they are and what they are doing. But we have that as a criteria within our residency, that it should be relevant for both the local community and for the artist or the designer or the architect. I would say that it's a lot of co-working, deep co-working, and actually I think that most of the ones who come, they want to interact so much, and so they become a part of the local community. And also that we who live here, we are all different. It's everything from fishermen to cultural creatives to business owners and so on. And I think that we as locals have started to see the handicraft and seen art as not only an elite thing that people do, that people around the world do if they get a funding for it. But people here see it as just as much as being a fisherman. It's a handicraft. Artists also have their tools, their work methods. And as long as you collaborate, you get so much more new perspectives, and it's interesting from both sides, I would say. Yeah.
Thank you. Can I just ask you, do you get some investments from the government in Norway to arrange for these artists in residence and artists for bureaucrats residencies and so on?
Yeah, we try to apply wherever we can apply from. Okay. We are not rich as a residency and not as a municipality either. So we try to do things with the less budget, but we have got funding from the Nordic Culture Point, and we also get in some projects we get funding from the government in Norway and also from the county, the region in Norway. Yeah, so but I once learned as a chaos pilot that if you take away 1 0 in the end of the budget, you become more creative. Not saying this to the policymakers to get away one, but as a practitioner, you try to be creative with what you have, and the most important resources we have here is the people. So
of course, you need to make up what you can with. In Swedish, you say "trolla med knäna." I don't know if you have that saying in English as well.
I won't take the chance on translating that.
You're making magic with your knees.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to invite Annukka with a question here. With listening to Moa. With the things that you are seeing now, with the cut in the budgets from the Nordic Ministry of Councils of Ministries, confusing to say that word. What do you see are the biggest risks with these cuts, Annukka?
Well, I think, thank you, Moa. It was really fun and inspiring to listen to you. And I think there were many aspects there that kind of present the Nordic values and the way we view art and culture, and also the things that the Nordic funds are directed at. Because I could hear in your presentation that the arts and culture is like supported on many levels. There's the professional artists, but then there's the participation of the villagers and every man and woman, and also artists' hobby. So I think this is the one of the really positive and valuable sides of the current Nordic funding structure, that it is so many-sided. So, of course, as we can see here, that you mentioned that you have, for example, gotten funding from via the Nordic Culture Point, who administers the funds of the Nordic Council of Ministers. So of course, this is a brilliant example of what we could lose if the funding goes drastically down. Mm. And also the concept of that you were talking about, the peripheral, that periphery can also be vibrant art hub. This is something that is also, in my opinion, very much in the core of our funding systems in all of the Nordic countries, because we are vast. We are geographically really vast areas, and I think that Norway has especially been active in sort of focusing on financing the more remote areas, keeping them lively.
Thank you, Annukka. Moa, I want to invite you again and ask you, do you see what could be done more regarding funding for these kinds of projects, like the best practice in Traena, in more innovational context, and driving this development to make artists integrated into the societies, and budget for artists being able to live and take part in the society development?
Yeah, I would say that we definitely need a longer time perspective.
Yeah,
because we all live in this project world now. Yeah. And that is vulnerable, because when suddenly other thing happens, you can easily close projects and close project fundings, because you have suddenly much more urgent things to do, you think. And of course we should save, I mean, when we have a climate crisis, which is urgent, we should definitely make the right funding structures in order to save the climate crisis. But if doing that means taking away a lot of money from other things, then you should ask yourself, how can we solve 3 problems with the same crown, with the same money? And so I think that many policymakers use art and culture as a topping up on things that would nice to have, not need to have. And I like Annukka's perspective of art as a public service. It's something that is what we are living for, even if it's not, I mean, art in a wide perspective. So I would say longer term perspectives on public funding, that you don't need to do those 1 year at a time panic funding application processes, because then you can never plan and you can never be that long-term actor. So yeah, that would be a great wish, and that we are allowed to work more intersectionally and transdisciplinary with art and, as I mentioned, business in residence. I know it's a hot topic, but trying to see how art actually can also feed into other processes. Try to be able to get funding for crossover things.
So integrate the culture in the welfare system more in a long-term way.
Yeah, definitely.
We don't have much time left, just a couple of minutes. I wanted to ask the both of you if you have any thoughts that you want to send out to the people that are listening, hopefully policymakers and politicians and so on, and civil servants as well, working in the expert agencies upon these questions. Do you have some last thoughts? Moa, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I would say that now it's a lot of focus on the Nordic model and Nordic as a unit. And I think that we have seen during this pandemic that we actually are, it's not only easy to be different nations, and we feel the borders on the bodies actually. And how can we work more from and together with our different nations in order to actually live up to that Nordic approach that we all think that we have and want to have? If we are serious in being a region, then we should definitely have more common structures and work closely together. And also perhaps I want to set a question mark about Nordic values that suddenly shows up on the agenda everywhere. I think we should be very aware of when we say the Nordic values, Nordic models, Nordic everything, we should include even more in it so that it doesn't get like a little closed group of rich nations that suddenly can set the agenda. We should be global as a Nordic model, or whatever you call it.
Yeah, thank you. I think I know what you mean, and not be homogenic, different, and praise that differences, but together we are strong. Moa, thank you. Annukka, do you have any last saying?
Well, maybe I would like to add, we have been talking quite a lot about the structures and the politics and so forth, but maybe the angle of the public, of the general people and the audiences, because we know that so many statistics show that for example, in Finland, that people want to experience art in their everyday life. For example, public art. Our study from this year shows that over 70% of people want to see and experience art in their everyday environment at workplaces and schools and home yards. So it is important to kind of remember that we audiences also have a power here. So we are the ones who should vote in the elections and use the cultural services, and remember to ask from the event organizer, have you paid the artist for their work? We have an influential role in developing these structures and the well-being of art and culture sector.
Thank you so much. I need to wrap this up because the time is running out. Thank you so much, Annukka Vahasoyrinki from Finland, for being with us, and Moa Björnson as well from Traena for being with us. Take care.
Thank you.
Keep in contact and keep on the good work that you do. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. 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 Okay, it's about to move on to the next seminar that we are planning. I don't know if we have all our guests with us. I know that we have a login from Turkey, Asli, and I know as well that Sarah from Konstnärernas Riksorganisation is here with us from Berlin as well. Perhaps it's only the two of you. I'm gonna multitask and see if we have some connections from England. And we don't. So I think I'm checking with my producer here. Let's move on, I think, with the two of my guests. Okay. We're moving on to the next topic. And this means that my two guests will have some more time talking to us, and I'm giving you some more minutes to talk. So feel free and broaden your ideas. We're going to talk about how how it has been to work as an artist during this pandemic time. What has it meant? What has it meant regarding self-censorship that we earlier have seen as well been a risk in the cultural field? My two guests that are here with me today is Asli Özdoğan. You're from the Omuz group. I'm gonna just, okay, Asli, do you hear me?
Yes, I do. Hello.
Yes, hi. Now your camera works as well.
Hi.
Hi. So nice to have you here. The sound works.
Nice
Do you
to
hear
be
me?
here. Thank you. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you. I'm just going to introduce the organization that you work together with. The Omuz group is a solidarity network initiated by a group of people working in the arts and culture who believe in the urgency of unreciprocated resource sharing and cooperation, which will only be sustainable through the support of others. Omuz was established to respond to the economic precarities and inequalities which became acutely visible during the COVID-19 pandemic, and to strengthen the network of solidarity. You will tell us more about this organization in a while. I just want to introduce my second guest as well. I don't need my papers for that because Sarah is my colleague here in Sweden. Sarah Edström, artist yourself and head of the umbrella organization Konstnärernas Riksorganisation in Sweden. Sarah, do you hear us and see us?
Yes, I am here. I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. I think since we are only two guests and we have 40 minutes, I would like to ask Asli to start with telling us, how have you been working in Turkey in this situation? I asked you before when we talked to tell us about the organization in a more general way and the policy situation, and after that you will tell us about how it has affected yourself. But maybe you want to start with telling us about the general situation and the Omuz group. The screen is yours.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Karo, for the invite to the World Art Day seminar. I am Asli Özdoğan. As Sarah said, I'm an artist living in Istanbul, and I'm here on behalf of Omuz. We will go further into the details of Omuz. It's a solidarity network that we started responding to the pandemic last year around this time in April. We are a team of 25 to 30 people working in different working groups, working in different parts for Omuz, each having different skill sets and relationships. Can you hear me well?
Yeah,
I just want to make sure because
perfectly.
Okay, great. I myself am an artist. I work with text installation and sculpture, but I've also worked several jobs in the curatorial and educational programs of art institutions and as artist assistants in the USA and in Turkey. I think this is important to mention at this point as a heads up for the topics we are about to discuss in terms of working artists. And artists wearing different hats under different conditions. At the moment, I'm co-running BAS, which is, I'm co-running BAS alongside Marina Papazian in Istanbul. BAS is an artist-run space collecting, displaying, and producing artist books and publications. It was founded in 2006 by Banu Cennetoğlu. So I'm continuing archival and organizational work at BAS while trying to maintain an artistic practice in Turkey. And regarding your question, perhaps it's best to start from describing the current conditions in Turkey as a backdrop to the individual situation. And by current conditions, I mean the current conditions in the field of art and culture, specifically in the COVID-19 era. It is fair to say that there has been no unreciprocated governmental support towards the field of art and culture in Turkey during the pandemic. I am highlighting the term unreciprocated because it's a term that we focused on a lot. It's very fundamental to Omuz. As many of the funds, private or public, during this time is either going towards artistic production, which includes the word product in itself, or asking for a certain type of representation of the funder. We know that some governments give out emergency funds which do not ask where the money goes or what it's used for, but it's not the case here. As Omuz, we find it important to speak of artists and art workers together, as they are usually important agents in the ecosystem, and the latter mostly goes unnoticed. With the closures and curfews and economic restrictions caused by the pandemic, many institutions and galleries closed their doors, and many art workers and artists were left without a job. Projects were cancelled, payments were delayed. Since there is no union of art workers and no existing structure of support from the government, a lot of these agents of the field are now in hard conditions. An insufficient example that I just thought of from the government, for example, is the attempt of the Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality to organize an art fair for artists to sell work during the pandemic. Which is again something that is asking for a product and in return making the labor and time going towards the artwork invisible. This is almost like a sugarcoating for what the government has been lacking to do over the years. Likewise, some private funds announced COVID relief funds towards the arts, but then in return ask for artistic production, which is also absolutely necessary. I'm not saying that that shouldn't exist, but it's not fundamental in today's terms, where what we are actually fighting towards is for basic needs. People need to eat, artists also need to eat and sleep and be able to pay for rent, and of course make art. The pandemic did not only engender an economic emergency, but of course also a social one, which manifested itself when life and work moved inside people's homes, for those who can still afford them, and onto computer screens, now divided into grids, leaving streets, galleries, museums, and most other public spaces empty. I mean, as humans, and particularly in this field, we are social beings, and these new virtual environments became the outlet to cope with the newfound isolation. So that's like the psychological effect, I think, like having everything, doing everything through the screen and losing a lot of the layers of what sociality can bring to us. And on top of these challenging conditions, there's also a growing indifference, isolation, and a lack of visibility and resources. Ignoring the existence of these issues doesn't just create social detachment between cultural workers, but it also perpetuates the exploitative working conditions, maybe after the pandemic as well. And considering all of this, I can say that lives of artists and art workers have been heavily affected by the pandemic on an individual and a social level. Yeah, and I wonder, like, how can we contemplate on alternative shapes of sharing and hearing after this, like after the pandemic, without making the same mistakes again?
Wow, so interesting to listen to, Asli. How many people have you talked with the Omuz group during the pandemic situation?
You mean in terms of applications?
That you have integrated in the network?
We are a group of, we have a larger group that we meet every other month, I would say, which is around 40 to 50 people. But as a smaller group, we are 25 to 30. Mm-hmm. But with the artists that have applied up until today, we have found 192 supports for the artists that have applied, which is probably less than half of the applications, okay. Because because that is the match that we could find towards. But we encourage people to apply again if they haven't got the funds.
And you say the government hasn't given support to these kinds of grants for free art, as we talk upon. Who has given the money to make these grants possible?
Oh, for Omuz, yes, there is definitely, I mean, Omuz stems from this, right? There is no governmental support, but there is this mentality of civic society and civic organization since the 1980s, and especially after like the 2013 protests in Turkey, where a lot of like our art workers came together and started discussing these topics. Right now the way Omuz functions is actually from we have two forms online. One is to apply for support, and the other one is to give support. And you can fill out either form, and if you fill out to give support, then you are supporting one art worker paying 1,000 liras, which is somewhere around $200. Yes, somewhere around, sorry, less than $200, $150. Okay. Right now, the currency has been fluctuating so much.
So it's citizens in the country.
Yes, it is citizens of the country, and most of the time it is people from the art ecosystem again that are able to do this, of course, because we haven't received anything from the government. And of course, as the word goes out, it is mostly art workers and also people in the field that can afford, that have a monthly income that can afford such support. And of course, I'm also conscious of using the word support because it can also go in dangerous directions in terms of philanthropy. But I think what's important at Omuz is that we don't have a pool of money. We don't have a large fund that we get and then we refund to these people. We just become the mediator between those who want to give support and those who want to receive support. So it's peer-to-peer in that sense. We just learn. The only thing we do is that we match the bank accounts of the people who want to give support and the people who want to receive support. And of course, there's always a larger number of people applying to get support than the people who want to give support. And the way we cope with that is that we have this algorithm which puts the supporters and the ones who applied for support next to each other. And then the algorithm mixes them completely randomly, so that we don't have a say in who gets the money and who doesn't, because it will always be imbalanced. There will always be more people applying for the money. But I think what's important to this point is that we had, for example, one, so Omuz right now is in its fourth term. And we use the term or cycle or period because they are like 3 month, they're in 3 month lengths. And after 3 months, we do the matching and the money goes to the applicant and to the person who applies for it. And we had a term, for example, with 200 people who got the money. But then we also had another period where only 30 people got the money. So it also depends on the economic situation here, and also, of course, the atmosphere, the political climate, and everything. But at the same time, I think it's very important to look at it in total, because what Omuz is doing is just being in the middle and announcing, of course. Facilitator, yes.
I think we have a question. I'm just going to look in the
I will relay.
Okay.
And it's from Jon Brunberg.
Yeah.
Why is there no union of art workers in Turkey, or almost aiming to start one?
I was thinking about this as well. Thank you, my producer here, Robert. We have a question from the audience, and I was just thinking, you are giving grants to 192 persons. Do you know how many professional artists you have in Turkey, and why haven't you been organized in a union historically?
This is an ongoing question, and Saliha Yavuz, the founder of Omuz, actually has a broad research in the self-organization of art workers since the founding of the Republic, which is 1923. She has a whole timeline where she gathers these organizations together. I think there has been several attempts or at least gatherings in terms of unionizing. I do not know the answer why it still hasn't happened up to this point, but I think there's always, like, I think with the people that started Omuz have been part of these organizations before. It's not something that just emerged out of nowhere, right? There's a background to it. There's a background of art workers, and there's a background of this language that has been built. I do not know where Omuz is ending, where Omuz is going to end. I do think that we really need a union of art workers, and I think Omuz is taking the steps towards unionizing in that sense. But there is also a lot of discussion in terms of where Omuz has to stop and either turn into something else or maybe disappear at some point, or completely become a new kind of organization, because of course unionizing requires a different kind of effort and a different kind of work.
I'm just sitting here thinking that maybe there can be money found in other international structures to build up unionizing organizations. Can I just ask you, do you know how many professional artists living in Turkey today?
I do not know the exact number, no.
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 No worries. No, but you have not, you are coordinating the money from the funders, so you have not applied for other international fundings for artists and so on. You have not made those kinds of applications from the Omuz?
It's also an ongoing discussion, right? We also have, so almost the way it functions right now, it has divided into working groups. So I am part of the dictionary group, which I might explain to you in detail later on. But of course, there's the group that's working on the funding, and it's an ongoing question, because I think what we try to emphasize here is that peer-to-peer exchange, where we put so much emphasis on the word unreciprocal, because there's nothing, when this person sends the money, they don't expect any kind of artwork or any kind of labor in return. It is just a way to say this is a mechanism that works. But at the same time, when bigger, larger international funds are applied to, I think that kind of unreciprocal understanding starts to become questionable. So yes, we do have plans. We do have groups working on and researching for those international funds, and we have applied at some point. But I think it's still a matter of discussion, whether we want to keep doing, or whether we want to get money from outside sources to refund, or whether we work on this network of solidarity, where we are like, this is a support mechanism, because it also has almost also has this idea that it's not just economic support, but at a certain point it can be like a platform for sharing, for example, food or even art supplies, or I need someone to paint my wall, who is out there, and someone else can reply like, I'm here, I can do it for this price, or something that will unite the art workers.
It's an amazing project, and I'm not saying that you need to do more. It's really, really amazing to hear about what you have built up during this year. I just want to invite Sarah to say hi to everyone, and Asli, for you to meet Sarah as well. She's the head of the umbrella organization in Sweden, and perhaps in the future we can have more bilateral interactions with the organizations and giving best practice to each other. Sarah, you're with us from Berlin.
Yes.
Hi.
Yes, hello everybody, and I'm so happy to have heard Moa and Annukka first, and to hear you, Asli, as well, to talk about all these different perspectives of the importance of art, and also, of course, we also always talk about funding and talk about money, and maybe we are a bit tired of talking about the COVID situation, but of course, it is a very pressing subject.
Yeah. Zara, I just wanted you to share with us how has the year been working in your role as I mean, we're having an audience here in Sweden that are familiar with the work, but I think we have some international viewers from different countries as well that are interested in hearing how it has been working from the Swedish perspective with artists.
Well, it has, of course, been a bit strange. I was just thinking that I'm sitting here in Berlin, and you, Zandra, you're sitting over there in Stockholm, and we haven't been working. We haven't been working together for a year. We've been working on a distance for a year. So, of course, that is a very strange situation. Yeah, I think we're talking about this Nordic perspective and, of course, the Swedish perspective of how we have been working to secure the financial situation for the artists in Sweden. It has been first a year ago, of course, a shock that nobody knew was going to happen. And our job has, of course, been to try to be like one step ahead so that we will supply the government with the proper information about how the situation for the artists could better in the best way possible. So we have been trying to, to collect information and to talk to our members and to see what is needed for the artists to survive this situation. So of course we have been sometimes frustrated that it feels like we are always like running after. I mean, the government has been presenting different relief funds and structures to help the cultural scene, but then we always have to be very specific to say what is specific to the visual artists in special things that has to be presented in a very special way for the visual artists because of course the crisis has made everything very acute, so the government has been presenting all these things that then we have to reply to and say, well, if we do like this, it could be better. So I think from the beginning we were very frustrated that we thought it was very slow and a lot of artists were really suffering because all the sales went down, everything was closed and everything was very uncertain. But I must say, during this year, we also see that it's now very getting much better, and the new kind of relief funds that are released now are getting much better and much more focused on actually helping the visual artists as well. But I still think one of the big struggles is to also see that artists are not just artists, but also small businesses, and so we have had difficulties to get the kind of relief funds that are directed to small businesses and for artists to be able to take part of the social welfare system and unemployment services and stuff like that is not specifically like cultural funds, but more like all these kind of topics that we have been working with as an artist association for 80 years, trying to just say that we are also businesses. We are like we don't want any special treatment, but we want to be included in the systems that is open for everyone else.
Thank you. When listening to Asli from Turkey as well, you get, in some way, you get the situation in Sweden in a perspective. The government has been on their toes, giving grants, giving support. With what you tell us now, Asli, the government has almost not done anything. But Asli, I want to come back to you. Has the government, because in Sweden, most of the visual artists are self-employed, up about 80% we see in our statistics are work as their own employers. Has the government made any help for those kinds of persons in general in Turkey?
The only thing that I can recall is this art fair that the Istanbul municipality tried, which I don't know if it happened at the end. I only saw the proposals of it, but there has been no refunds for small businesses in that sense either.
No.
No.
Okay, so in Sweden we have seen grants in different steps. We have seen support in different kinds of areas. I can't give you the exactly numbers in euros and dollars, but one example is that from 2021 they will give a yearly working scholarship for 43 Swedish millions. That's 430. No, I can't do the math now. It's 430 millions a year for the grants. No, that's too much. Sorry, 4.3 millions euros every year for grants. And I mean, how does that sound in your ear?
I mean, this was part of Turkey's proposal when it was. I remember this being talked about when Turkey was in the process of becoming a nominee for the EU. Was that these art funds would survive, would thrive, or they would start at least, but no, nothing in that sense.
No, and nowadays maybe opening of those chapters regarding the membership of the EU haven't gone closer. Could you please tell us, Asli, you're working as an artist yourself. How has it been for your work situation?
It has been, I mean, as I told you, I'm also doing this kind of archival and organizational work. And so since I've been doing institutional work as well, it has been a little bit different than just doing my own practice. But I think that's also something that explains the situation here, is because I know that it's going to be very hard to fund my own art practice, that I need an extra job to work in an institution. And I spent most of my time working in a museum here during the pandemic, which helped me pay my rent, which helped me with life. But at the same time, of course, it took away from a lot of my practice in terms of time.
Was the museum open? Sorry for interrupting you, but was the museum open?
The museum was opened, the museum closed in March 2020 and then opened mid-June last year. So it was closed for an amount of time. And then over the summer it opened, and in September it opened with 7 new exhibitions. And I was working in the learning program of Art Museum, to be exact, in Istanbul, which opened in 2019 September, but then it hit the pandemic within the first 6 months of its opening. So it's been a tough time for the museums as well. I see that.
I just want to say also that I think I'm also running an artist-run space in Sweden, like you talked about this bus organization, and I think and also connecting to the previous speakers, I'm also very close to the Arctic Circle in a small place called Luleå in the north of Sweden, and so like talking about this, the importance of artists working for other artists and coming together and working with the community and the solidarity of our colleagues. I think that is very important. And so for me, has also been working with my artist-run space for now 15 years. But even before that, I've been living and working in the city of Luleå all my life, and like the importance of being part of changing the cultural politics in your region, in your city. I think that is such a strong an important thing. So for me, it has always been a very crucial part of being an artist is also to work with things like this. I mean, of course, it's also like you say, it's also you have to also get you have to get money somewhere, so you have to have another job. But it's not only about that. It's like everything is feeding the other. I think you become a better artist if you are also engaged in working for others, because of course you get to meet other artists and you get inspired and everything develops from there. But I think as we're talking about cultural politics, I think we are a very, very strong and important part of changing the structures for artists. So now in my role as both an artist and as running the Artist Run Space, and of course now the head of this organization, I think there are different ways of trying to influence the politics of art and to secure possibilities to make exhibitions, of course, and to make art projects happening in the region and the city there where you are. I don't remember if it was Moa or Annukka that said that we are all locals. We talked about the central periphery thing as well, and I think in these times we're getting more and more, of course, online. So what the center periphery thing is now changing, or anyone can be like more in charge of the situation where you actually live and work. I think that is. So it's very inspiring to hear you talk about the Omuz group and that's coming together and in a situation where it's very difficult situations for the artists in Turkey. Then the artists come together and come up with creative solutions for things. Well, of course, in the lack of governmental funding, you have to do something. But yeah, I think it's a very strong and powerful thing.
Asli, please.
I was wondering, with the Artist Run Space that you've been running for 15 years, that's also a long time. Do you get governmental support specifically for artist run initiatives in that sense?
Yes. So, so from the beginning, of course, we got just a small, some small financial support from the city, but then we're like getting more and more support each year because apparently they think we do something good. And I also think it's important for the government to support initiatives that are like all over Sweden. So yes. So we are actually also, we have been able to keep open during the pandemic, which I think it's very important because we talked also about this, the importance of the audience and I mean, we have been like some kind of, space where you can actually still access, even though a lot of other things are closed. Like the bigger institutions are closed, but we can stay open. So we are like part of this, discussion about topics that are, outside the normal political discussions. Because through art we can like open discussions about our lives, which I think is a very important thing. Talking about how to maintain a democracy and an open society, and we need all this, and we need to meet physically. Because we are very, very used to doing stuff like this. We meet. It feels like I'm meeting you, even though you're like on my screen. But I think what we lack is all this not planned things, the things that are happening in between when we meet, which I think is kind of like the basis of our human lives. So if we go too much into the digital encounters and discussions, that is very good. A lot of artists and a lot of people create very good, interesting ways of reaching an audience through internet. But normally we do that, and then we also have this physical encounters where we're just hanging around and talking and networking. Now that we lack that, I think a lot of us are really affected mentally. I mean, this is not good for our health. We are crying.
I felt that this was developing to a dinner party where my guests started to speak with each other without the moderator, and I felt happy about that.
Good.
We missed so much the meeting situation where the organic improvisation thing can happen. We just have some minutes left, and Ashley, I wanted to ask you, and I don't want you to feel uncomfortable with the question, but the self-censorship questions I need to ask because we promoted that question as well. Do you think that you could say that artists feel free to do what kind of art they want to, or do you feel that you see a threatening situation for artists in Turkey today?
Mm-hmm. Yes, when you say free, I can take it two ways. Of course, in terms of freedom of expression, but then again, can be answered in terms of economic independence, which I think I will focus more on. But yes, censorship, and more frighteningly, self-censorship is an issue under the current regime in Turkey. I mean, obviously, it's not easy to speak out. But at the same time, the platforms that can allow, as we were talking with Sarah, that can allow certain content are also diminishing because of the lack of funding. Yes. Because a lot of these already funded institutions already have an agenda of what they can speak of, and of course goes through a lot of layers of reading through. Whereas these other smaller organizations and these other spaces that will allow a certain type of content, of political content maybe, or some sort of discussion, cannot form or cannot sustain themselves in this time because of the lack of funding. And in terms of conditions of artists, I mean, a lot of artists want to leave Turkey because the conditions here are as I described. And during the first wave of the pandemic, Eda Yiğit, who is an independent researcher, surveyed 150 artists working and living in Turkey. And the results show that 43% of respondents' monthly income is 2,000 liras, which is approximately $250 or below, and 26% of respondents is between 2,000 and 4,000 liras, which is between $200 and $500. And 80% of the participants are working at a second job to maintain their artistic practice. And 40% have no social security coverage. I mean, imagine living in these conditions. Obviously, a lot of my colleagues are looking for an outlet to leave the country in order to find economic sustenance and also to find a better way of expression. 43% of the participants in this survey had an income below the hunger line and 97% below the poverty line, which is very hard conditions to work at. I mean, we're talking about the poverty line and trying to imagine creating artworks which feels like a surplus in that kind of situation, which should never feel like it, right? Like art should never feel like a surplus of society in that sense. It's a need, right? I mean, the dysfunctionality and insufficiency of public support available to artists and cultural workers for survival in the neoliberal ecosystem in Turkey is a reality that cannot be dismissed. The interests of legal entities take precedence over improving the working and living conditions of individuals. And due to the political and economic environment in Turkey, artists and cultural workers have found themselves obligated to work for a tomorrow they can't even envision. In fact, common knowledge to overcome timely challenges, lessons on survival, real life advice is not being taught or brought up as much as it should in schools or workplaces. And perhaps unsurprisingly, none of the municipalities or the Ministry of Culture and Tourism, as we talked about, have allocated crisis support to the visual arts, even in this particularly threatening period. So yes, it's hard to practice free art, both in terms of, I think in both interpretations of the word, like in terms of freedom of expression and also in terms of economic independence. It's hard to practice right now under the current situation, and it's very understandable why a lot of the people from the field want to leave these conditions and go somewhere else.
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts about that. It's not an easy situation to describe for your country. I understand that. And for us in Sweden, it's a good warning lamp that censorship is not only about the lack of arm length, it's also the funding structures that really can make the censorship stronger, as you say. I have a situation here to handle. We have it's 11 o'clock and we're supposed to finish up, but we have a participant with us from England. I just want to, if you stay with us for 5 or 10 minutes, Ashley and Sarah and the audience as well. So I will see if I can get Jeremy with us from England. Hi, Jeremy, do you hear us and see us?
Yes. Am I late?
You're a bit late.
I'm very late.
I can't hear you. The sound is quite low.
Low?
And I can't see you. Let's see.
I can see you.
I can see you now, yeah.
I'm sorry, this timing thing is so totally confusing. I thought we were beginning at 11:15 and at 10:15 we meet beforehand.
Yeah, no worries. It's the time thing. It's always like this. It's a bit confusing, but no worries. I asked the audience to stay for 10 minutes longer to listen up to you, because it's really nice to have you here. Welcome, Jeremy. And no worries with the time situation. The only thing is the sound. I can see. I want to see if my producer can make anything with the sound, or can you raise in your sound?
I'll try.
Okay.
I'm gonna. How's that?
Yeah, it works. Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, Jeremy. Have you heard anything about the discussion?
No, I thought it was beginning at 11:15. So,
yeah. Okay. We've been talking about the difference with the situation in Turkey and Sweden, and the lack of the union organization in Turkey, and the situation in Sweden where we have a union and where we have a government as well, given lots of funding for the artists and so on. And Ashley has told us, she's an artist herself from the Omuz group. She's been needed to work in a museum to survive as an artist, and have not been able to work that much, and are maybe considering moving abroad in the future. How has it been for you as an artist in England, Jeremy?
Well, I mean, I can't speak for all artists. Obviously, I'm just speaking for myself, but it's been very quiet, obviously, and museums are more or less been closed throughout the whole period, and they've laid off a lot of people. So there's not much opportunity for working in museums, certainly. But basically, it's been a year of where a lost year for a lot of people, I think. And what has happened, though, is there's been much more public art, people making art that's been put on the streets, maybe. That might be one positive element. And maybe people thinking about the streets more differently, in a different way, and thinking about public art in a different way. But I think for a lot of artists, especially younger artists, it's been a bit of a disaster, really, because they don't necessarily get the government support they might have hoped for in the way that some people do. And that goes for a lot of people who are freelancers, creative freelancers. They haven't got the state support that they might have got if they were working for an institution or an organization.
So you mean they lack the infrastructure, finding the financing structures that more established artists find?
Yes, and also, you know, it's a precarious life anyway, being an artist.
Yeah.
So when something like this happens, it becomes a lot more precarious. And also, of course, because a lot of work opportunities are closed for jobs in terms of bars and restaurants, you know, that sort of casual labor, those jobs have gone as well. So younger artists who may have had those side jobs basically can't work. So for them, I think that generation, especially post university generation, it's probably been a real disaster in a lot of ways. And for museums as well in the UK, I think have had a very, very bad time. You know, they haven't really, they're still closed in Britain. They've been closed since December, and they weren't really properly open at all anyway. So they open again in May after nearly a year, really a year of closure. And so I suppose we won't really know what the situation is until people like come out into the open and we can assess. It's almost like after some kind of bombing raid, and everyone comes out of the bunkers and they see how their lives are and what's left. Is it in ruins, or is there still an infrastructure there? So
when we spoke before, I asked you about the situation for the art and the artist, and you pointed out there's a really difference between how the future will be for the art or for the artists. I mean, you told me that you observed the demonstrations and we are experiencing an intense time that can give energy for art, but for the artists, it's another situation.
Yeah, well, there will always be art, like there will always be music. There will always be people making things and being creative. So I don't worry about art as much. And also, you know, the last year has been incredibly, in a way, a very inspiring time for a lot of people because of the social change that has happened in various ways, and they've intersected as well. So that's been a very, in a way, there's a lot of material there for artists to get to grips with and to try and understand or to interpret or work with. So that's actually a challenge, but also it's quite an inspiring time of social change. So this is not a bad thing, but it's just, I suppose for a lot of artists, they're trying to work out how they can not make money from it, but how they can survive in their work. I mean, there's probably so much art has been made in the last year in Britain or around the world, just people being at home making art. They not even see themselves as artists, but there's probably been, in terms of art production, probably more than there has been almost ever before, strangely. But it's just where does that go now? What happens to it? And I suppose that's, for me, is that's the question, isn't it?
How have you been working? You personally, how have you been working?
Well, you know, everything was put off for a year, so everything was cancelled. So there's that, more or less. But I have been working. One of the upsides is that there's a lot of free space in public that can be used for advertising. A lot of advertisers are not advertising, so all the kind of spaces where there would be advertising has been. A lot of those organizations, strangely, that own those spaces are quite sort of sympathetic to artists and have sort of quite good sort of political instincts in a way. And so they have allowed artists to make work, a lot of it very critical of the situation of the government. And so that's been a surprise, really. And so a lot of artists have been showing their work in public as posters. So there's been a lot of that around, a lot of it trying to make people feel happy and make them energize them or raise them morale. But a lot of it also is quite critical of the situation and of how the government handled, especially the early stages in Britain, were really bad. It was very badly handled. I mean, as I'm sure you know.
Yes.
So in terms of the public space, and also the only times when people have been really together in public space in Britain has been during demonstrations. And in those demonstrations, often a lot of art has been made, or placards and statements and so on. And so there's a lot of visual culture around that, which has been interesting to see and to attend as well, see about people's behavior and so on. So I think people have appreciated the public realm more as they've appreciated nature as well, and parks and so on. So maybe we will rethink space, public space, and art's role within that. I'm trying to be hopeful rather than think about the end of the world, which is something I can think about quite a lot. kind of a hopefulness around this this moment. But then you have a whole, on the other hand, you have all this whole kind of NFT thing as well. So I made one. I don't really understand what they are. I kind of understand it, but in a way, for me, that sort of represents the sort of the end of the world, really. That idea of the market, this kind of insanity of the market and technology coming together. And the sort of environmental consequences of that technology as well. It's almost a perfect storm of that. So there's that as well to look at, and maybe, you know, when young artists see all the money that's being made with those NFTs, because you only hear those big headlines, that must send people a bit crazy, because it used to be art fairs that sent young artists a bit nuts. Well, it certainly did me, in the sense that you just couldn't work out where you fitted in the world. And now this whole NFT craze, or mania, I would call it, probably a lot of younger artists just think, how do I fit into this? What is this to do with me? So that's another thing to deal with.
And those are questions that we work with at the union as well, regarding copyrights and so on, with the digital rights when producing art. So it's not been quiet in the art world during the 2020. It's been happening, a transformation.
Yeah, I mean, also in the museum world as well. If you want to talk about the wider museum world, in Britain at the moment, there's a huge discussion around returning artifacts to nations that had been looted during the British Empire. And of course, we've had moments about the British Empire and reassessing our history, which is a massive thing to do for any country, and well worth doing. So we've had a huge moment, and of course the art world is intimately involved in that, or the museum world is. So there's huge discussions, and you know, unfortunately for us, we have a government that's interested in fighting battles in the cultural space. So we have culture wars happening in Britain on a regular basis, and the government is provoking them.
Could you describe that for us? How is that cultural war being?
Well, there's so many. It's on many levels. You know, for example, there's an order basically from the government a week ago, or maybe a little bit more, that all public buildings have to fly the Union Jack, fly our national flag at all times, which has never happened before. And the Union Jack now is appearing behind politicians when they speak from their homes. Even they get these huge flags that they have behind them, and it's like a kind of a war over the flag. Mm-hmm. So that's a massive thing. And then also there's a discussion around heritage and British history and how that intersects with the country estates, but also museums, and how they should be interpreting the past, and how they should be neutral in their interpretation of the past, and how we should not be taking down statues, and we should be protecting statues. There's a law that was brought in that actually, I don't know if it's actually the case, but you could go to prison for 10 years for attacking a statue. This is a new law that came in, or will be coming in. And people said you can go to prison for longer for attacking a statue than you can from attacking a person or a woman. And so it's like the priorities of the government are really to fight these battles. It's probably because a lot of the government, including our Prime Minister, used to work for newspapers. And so they had this mentality of satisfying the public every day by writing something and by starting these discussions, which we would have done in a newspaper, writing a column. And so that they have opinions, and they want to tell their opinions and start discussions and debates. And this is the kind of the result of that, of a cabinet and of a government full of people who basically were paid for their opinions when they were writing newspapers.
That can be quite frightening when you need to make up new laws every day that can increase the space for the individual.
Well, quite. And so they, you know, every week it's like there's a new idea that's put forward about attacking the BBC, for example. That's a very big one. They're very anti-BBC. And I mean, it is a real problem. I mean, Boris Johnson worked for a newspaper in the 1990s, and he was a Brussels correspondent for this newspaper, right-wing newspaper, and he used to make up stories about the EU. And these stories have become part of a mythology about the EU. They're lies, but they effectively became stories that people just still repeat, even though they were lies at the time. And so this is, you know, it's very damaging. And so if you start attacking culture like this as well, they're very effective at it. They're very good at it. and they know that it's a space where they can fight a battle and maybe even win it. So it's whether you want to sort of take part in these battles against them in this space that they've created, or you want to do something different as an artist. But history in Britain at the moment is really up for grabs in a way, and it's really being questioned, and in a very healthy way but it's a generational thing, I would argue. It's the younger people are much more interested in questioning that through culture and art and just through ideas.
And they have the courage to do that. They are not
Absolutely.
feeling self-censorship.
There's no censorship as such, but the government just released a report last week about race in Britain, and they basically knew exactly what the report was going to say, but they still, before they'd written it, and it was basically saying there is no institutional racism in Britain, and it was a report to satisfy a certain part of the population of Britain. So they will, and the reaction was very strong from young people. And so they're young people in Britain are very aware of these things, but it's going to be quite a tough 3 or 4 years, I think, in Britain. It's probably more akin to what was going on in America last year and the years before.
Yes.
It's a continuation of that. So now Britain has that sort of position in the world, really, that America had, I would argue.
You're describing, both Jeremy and Ashley, a dogmatic kind of governmental guiding. But the seminar we had before, we talked a bit about art and culture as part of the welfare system in societies. And Britain has had that before. You don't see a discourse when you talk about culture as welfare longer today?
Well, what happened is in the last 10 years, we've had the Tory government, a right-wing government, that has massively cut spending for the arts, but also in local, with councils. And that's probably been the most damaging thing, really. And so all those projects that were happening have been cut massively, and for young people especially. And so that was something that was very fashionable or popular in the first 10 years from 2000 onwards until the crash. It was something that was spoken about a lot, and art was used in that way, but increasingly less and less because the resources are so drained, really. And councils are in terrible trouble. They have, they're closing museums or restricting access to them, and arts education in school has been cut massively because the government didn't see it was important. So you go into schools, brand new schools. It's happened to me. I went to a brand new flagship school in the north of England a few years ago, and I sat in a room which had mirrors all around it, this big room. And I said, "What's this room?" And they said to me, "Oh, this used to be where we used to do dance classes with the students, but we don't have a teacher anymore. So we don't do dance classes in this room. We just use it for examinations." And so and this was like the top school in the area where the government says it's the best school in the area. And so even the top schools that are best funded don't have provision for young people. This is a very deprived area as well to make art. Of course, the private schools have all of those things, but the schools for the majority of the population have had arts cut from the syllabus and made to be non-essential, art and drama, music, and all those things. So that starts very early. That's a big sign, isn't it, really? And so that's something that's been a very troubling progression, really, in the last 10 years.
So it's a kind of new Thatcherism happening in the country. Basically,
because our government are full of people who grew up like I did in that era. They're all about my age, so they grew up in the same environment, political environment that I did, and so I totally understand where they're coming from, because they bought into it massively. Even people I went to school with became politicians, but bought into that story and that way of organizing society. So it's, they are children of that moment. And I'm not, clearly, but they're continuing the work, basically, as they see it. There's the great betrayal of Margaret Thatcher when her own party had to sort of depose her. And I suppose it's that guilt around Margaret Thatcher being deposed that these men continue. They were crying at her funeral. You know, the person that was the most top person, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, who was the man that brought in cutting all the provisions in education. He at Margaret Thatcher's funeral, he was in tears. He was crying. It was like a very famous photograph. And he's like my age. It's like in mid-50s.
But you are hopeful. You started saying that you are hopeful for the artists as well.
I don't know about the individual artists. I'm hopeful for art, but maybe that's better, because I'm a natural pessimist. But I think art, I'm hopeful for art. It will always survive. It's so resilient. Like music is so resilient. There'll always be something to look at. People will be making things. Children will be making things. The public will be making things. I think that is the urge to be creative is universal and it's strong. But and I'm interested to see what the art students will be doing in the next 5-10 years, or when they leave art college, whether they'll be thinking about the market in the way they might have done 10 years ago. The market was so important. Maybe hopefully it'll be less important. There's some just very bad examples of artists who make a lot of money, and I suppose they think they want to be like these people, but they're great disappointments, those artists, in a way, aren't they?
Let's follow up this question in some years again, Jeremy. I just wanted to invite Asli and Sarah to maybe give some comments on what you have been talking about, Jeremy, and then we need to wrap up because our audience need to go for lunch, I think. But Asli, do you have any thoughts about the situation in England when you listen to Jeremy?
I was actually struck by thinking about museum structures and the colonial history and the preservation of artifacts, and also the kind of claiming back of the artifacts. I have worked on this kind of project before, especially in London, in the Trafalgar Square with the last Fort Flint project by Michael Rakowitz. I took part of that project. I was his assistant for a long time in the States, and it's interesting for me to think about like the current conditions and also thinking about heritage in that sense and claiming it back. Yeah, I think that's something that I've been like thinking about as you spoke.
Okay, thank you, Asli. Sarah from Berlin, what's your thoughts?
Well, I just think all of these topics that we're talking about today, everything is kind of intertwined into different lines. What we can talk about, but what I was thinking now is that we talk about censorship, because that was also like the topic of today's talk, the censorship in the times of COVID, and then we can really see that it has a lot to do with like cutting the funding and kind of silencing voices in that way. Sometimes it's very open, and you say you don't like this type of art and not, and now, like as you said, in England, it's the government is like promoting the more kind of nationalist things. Don't take away the sculptures, don't question that, and then you have the Union Jack in the background and all that. So that kind of like of course make people want to if you want to be part of the system or like get the funding, maybe you kind of like shift your practice to fit into more what is funded or liked. That is a very big that is a danger, I think. And also then, of course, censorship in a different way, as you Asli are talking about also in Turkey. But I think this financial situation that we're always talking about is, of course, like controlling or guiding what kind of art we want to do or can do. And it's just like a bit more sneaky. Like if we talk in the Swedish context, it's just like one of our political parties that would say that they want to control what type of art is funded, but then you can cut the voices of artists just by cutting funding for a lot of things, so that the audience don't get the same access to free art.
Thank you, Sarah. One thing I'm sitting here thinking about is that artists just want to be included as well in the social security system, like everyone else, and be part of the society. That has been one thing that's been really put in light during the COVID situation, that we're, not me, I'm a bureaucrat, but the artists are such a big part of the precariat in Sweden and in other countries as well. But I want to ask Jeremy, do you want to wrap up with something before we leave the discussion today?
What, like we wanted to sing something, or?
Yes. Do you want to?
Yeah.
What's your word to the kids that are listening, and the art kids and the bureaucrats? Well,
firstly, I'd like to apologize for being late, because I thought this was on at 11:15, but it probably is at 11:15 your time. So I'm totally the wrong time for this. So maybe that shows in Britain we are a bit out of step, because we have a different time zone as well. But I think to wrap up, I think there's in the last year in Britain, I think there's never clearly, there are so many opportunities in terms of how, in UK at least, in terms of ideas, the way they're being challenged in a way they've not been challenged before. So that's in a way is quite exciting. But you're right about artists. Artists in Britain are not, on the whole, sort of taken. They have very high profile. A number of artists in Britain have a really high profile, but on the whole, I don't think there's much support for creative people in the art world, at least. And they're not. They love taking the money when they go to college. The government loves that. But after that, I don't think they're particularly interested in what they do. And certainly they haven't been supported in the last year. So this is a problem, but whether it will change, I don't know. But a lot will change. It has changed in the last year. So let's try and be hopeful about that. You've given me inspiration to follow up on the agency that said that they can't see any proof of institutional racism. I want to follow up that with other people. Can I just say, I should mention that report was ordered by someone who used to work in the culture sector, and she worked in the culture sector for the Mayor of London when Boris Johnson was mayor. I know this person very well. And so there is a definite link, because she is basically was a cultural theorist and worker and commissioner, and then she commissions a report about race. So the connection is very, very tight between these things. You cannot separate art from all these other issues that are going on. But we know this. But in this report, you should read it. Or read the reporting on it, because it was a huge controversy, and hopefully it was very discredited, but probably a lot of people were very happy to see it, because it's basically told them they weren't racist, and Britain is not a racist country. So let's just move on to the next thing. But it's well worth looking into. Yeah, and what you're telling us now is a proof of the lack of arm length in the production of the knowledge. Absolutely, and the government, if I may just finish, the government is getting very interested in who the trustees are of public bodies, of arts organizations, of TV companies, and they're intervening to put their people into these places. So actually, it's not censorship in the traditional sense, but it's actually control. It's a form of control, basically, and intelligence gathering almost, and surveillance of arts organizations, museums, TV companies, and so on. Thank you so much for being with us today, Jeremy Deller from London. And no worries with the time thing. Let's meet again another time and talk longer. And Asli Estoyran, sorry for the pronunciation. Thank you for being with us from Istanbul. It was a real pleasure to meet you. And Sara Edström from Berlin. So looking forward to talking to you all again. Take care. And let's stand up for the artists. Exactly.
Yes.
Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Bye. Nice to talk to you. Bye.
Bye. And thank you so much for being here today with us, celebrating World Art Day 2021. And hopefully next year we will meet both physically and digitally and talk about these questions. Take care. Bye.